I flew 8,000 miles to review the Sony A1II. That's 2 9-hour flights back to back, then only to reach Nairobi, Kenya, get 3 hours of sleep, meet up with the gang, and then jump on another plane to reach the camp. This was the most intense travel day of my life, but it was all worth it. In this video, we're gonna forget about the specs. I'm focusing on real world usage, okay? And the things that I learned about this camera, actually taking pictures with it. Instead of just sitting on the couch, looking at the spec sheet, and just assuming that the A1II is just a firmware update, like most people have been saying. Now, truly, I haven't tested a camera like I did the A1II. Okay, I shot over 10, 20,000 photos in Africa. I was able to shoot lions, birds, elephants, cheetahs, leopards, hippos, all kinds of different reptiles and many different lighting situations and environments. I was shooting both the A1II alongside the A1. Doing it this way really allowed me to see if there are truly real world benefits to the A1II. Also, I want to thank Luminar Neo for making this trip possible. Africa was one of the most beautiful places I've ever visited, and even though I'm deathly scared of bugs. Oh fuck, bitch, over here. This trip really exceeded my expectations, so I'm gonna be sharing some of my secret sauce editing tips using Luminar Neo throughout this video. The kind of stuff that you can do in this program will make your jaw drop. Like, take this lion photo. It was taken in really flat lighting, but if I really wanted to, I can do things like artificially adding my own light source, almost as if I was there with my own softbox. I could even move it around, change the angle of the light, and then by quickly brightening up the eyes, this image now pops off the screen. If you want to try this out for yourself, the link is in the description. The first thing I want to talk about is ergonomics, okay? The things that I liked better and the things that were a non-issue for me. The overall handling of the A1II with its larger grip is slightly better in the hands, but this is truly a non-issue for me. I like both of them. The 4-way screen on the A1II truly makes all the difference in the shooting experience. I cannot overstate how freaking amazing it is to have a screen with this mechanism, okay? When I wanted a low angle vertical shot with the A1 with just the tilt, like I was pretty much in prayer mode, okay? I had to perfectly frame up, like I was like this. I was angled down and I was like barely peeking at the screen here, shooting like this. I call it prayer mode. I'm praying that my shot is composed properly and in focus. Now with the A1II, I can shoot both low angle vertical shots, right? I can tilt it this way, and also I can tilt it landscape. There's just no better screen for a hybrid camera. And I'm talking about the mechanism, okay? Because the screen quality isn't great, but even worse than that, okay? This is a $6,500 camera. What is going on with the brightness, okay? Putting both of these cameras side by side, the OG A1, the screen in its brightest setting, which is sunny weather, the A1 is a little bit brighter than the A1II. Like in regular mode, like the way it comes out of the box, the A1II screen is so dim that I just think that this is absolutely unacceptable for a $6,500 camera. And this is just the R5 Mark II screen. Does get brighter and it is larger. It looks so much nicer than the Sonys. I don't understand. Sony makes great looking phone screens, TVs. What? Come on. Now for some other things that I made note of on this trip. So the camera feels more secure in the hand, just feels more grippy even when I'm shooting at weird angles like this, just holding it from above, just feels more grippy and more secure in the hand. The anti-dust function, that's when you turn off your camera and the shutter closes down so that you don't get dust in your sensor. I do wish that it closed faster. It takes a couple of seconds, just like the A1, and that sucks because when I'm rushing to do a lens change, I got something in front of me, adrenaline's pumping. Every millisecond matters here. I wish that it was more instant, faster. I really do like the new C5 button here next to the grip. So I actually mapped this button here to 5 frames per second. So let's say if I'm shooting at 30 frames per second on the dial here, if I'm shooting a slow moving animal, let's say like an elephant, I can just press this with my middle finger and now I'm at 5 frames per second. So I'm not shooting, or I don't have to take my hand off the lens to do one of these. And with a heavy lens, that's kind of a pain to do. Now, speaking of elephants, this was probably one of my favorite elephant shots. Let me show you how I edited in Luminar Neo. When you start editing in Luminar Neo, you can choose from many of their presets that not only adjust the color, but they adjust other aspects of the image. For this one, I wanted the sky to be more dramatic, so I chose the one that brings out the sky a little bit more. Now, when you enter the editing studio, you can actually see the edits that the preset made and make adjustments to any of those if you want. But this is a good starting point for me. I started off using the AI Enhance tool. It adds a little bit more contrast and makes the image pop a little bit more. The next thing I did was add a little bit of Sky Enhancer to bring out a little bit more detail out of the sky. Now this is where the magic happens, or at least my secret sauce. In the HSL tab under color, this is where I'm gonna desaturate most of the colors in the image. Now for this one, I'm going heavy on the blues. I'm turning down the blues and the greens, and a little on the reds and the oranges. Okay, in luminous, I'm gonna turn down the brightness of the greens to make the elephants just pop more, and also make the blues in the sky darker. Now this is just me tinkering, but look at how insane I can make this image look using the Twilight Enhancer tool. Looks like something out of the movie Dune, but I'm not going that far with this one. One of my favorite tools in Luminar is Relight AI. It creates a 3D depth map where I can adjust the overall lighting in the image. This is another powerful tool that I'm using to make the elephants pop even more from the picture. Now I use the dramatic tool to increase the clarity and give it a little bit more of that grungy look that I'm going for. I don't normally do this in all my images, but this is what makes editing and Luminar so unique and fun, right? In the Atmosphere AI tab, I'm able to add artificial fog and haze to the image. And here the layered fog looks good and it just goes right above the elephants. It looks realistic. The next thing I did was slightly increase the brightness of the elephant trunk of that middle elephant that was looking at the car, just to draw more attention to it. And then I finished off by adding another LUT just to really give me that rich desaturated look. I know that sounds like an oxymoron, but I wanted just a little bit more richness in the tones of the image. And this is the final result. Really happy with it. Let's talk about the autofocus, arguably the most important update on the A1II. An analogy that works for this. The A1 is like driving a car where you have to steer and accelerate. Normal, right? The autofocus on the A1II is like jumping into a full self-driving Tesla. See, for wildlife photography, comparing these two autofocus systems is not even close. And it's actually kind of sad given that this was the flagship camera like a month ago. The Sony A1II, it isn't perfect and actually has a lot of quirks to it. But the way it identifies and puts boxes around animals that are not even looking at the camera, okay, and from such a far distance, this camera truly allows me to focus more on composition, which arguably, it's kind of an important part of the process of taking a nice photograph. Now, when I would switch to the A1, I would have to work a little harder. And by harder, I mean like physically having to move the focusing point around, because the animal AF just doesn't cut it on the A1. Most of the time, the A1 won't find the eye of the animal, and you know what? That's fine. I can move the focusing point around, no big deal. But if I had to take a low angle shot, now everything kind of changes. A lot of the time, I was hanging out of the truck. This is incredible, dude. I want to make the animals appear bigger, and I want to give the shot more depth where I can not only just get grass in the background. If I get from a lower angle like this right here, I can include some more of the sky, get the horizon in the shot. Now, shooting this way with the A1II, it was just a million times easier to nail focus and composition. It honestly feels like cheating in a way. Now, when there's more than one animal in a frame, I think that the A1II did a decent job of finding the animal closest either to the lens, or closest to the middle. Now, I did say there were some quirks to the autofocus system, and there definitely is. So as much as I have hyped the subject detection on here, it's not perfect. The autofocus has some quirks. The one thing that I struggled with the most was shooting through any kind of grass or bush. Okay, so if there was any grass in the foreground, slightly blocking the subject, a lot of the times the camera will focus on the brush. And even if I use the small AF point like I just told you about and place it on the subject, it's still gonna focus on that brush most of the time. Now the solution for this was to map subject recognition to a custom button. So I customized it to the left side of the jog wheel. I will turn off subject detection, and then I'll use the spot AF. Then I would be able to get focus. Maybe I'm just asking too much of my camera, but I'm just reporting back to you. This was something that was genuinely causing me to miss shots. Now check out this cheetah shot. Two cheetahs were eating the gazelle in the background, and I framed that up perfectly with the other cheetah looking back. For this cheetah photo, I'm gonna skip picking a preset. In the edit tab, I'm going straight to the color transfer tool, where now you can import one of your photos and it's gonna transfer that same color grade, that same look onto your photo. And I use one of my golden hour pictures as a reference. I think it looks great. Now it's not perfect. I had to fine tune it with the sliders. I just felt like it was a little bit too oversaturated, so I got it to a pretty good place. I used the Enhance AI tool to increase the brightness and contrast. In the HSL tab, I went straight for those greens, man. Those greens can be really tricky. I wanted the greens to appear a little bit more yellow to give it that golden hour feel. Next, I added a vignette to just draw more attention to the center of the photo. I went to the atmosphere tab, and again, I added a little bit of fog to the image. The background is just very flat looking, and I think that by adding a little bit of haze on top of the cheetah just makes it pop a little bit more, makes the image look more dynamic. Next, I went to add another LUT to really make the image more just rich in color. And the final thing I did was in Dodge and Burn, I used the Dodge tool to brighten the eyes of the cheetah a bit. This is the final result. Extremely happy with the results. Now let's talk about the pre-capture mode on the Sony A1II. Either you need it or you don't, but if you need it, it's a big deal. You know, that's the funny thing about pre-capture, is that there are people that would absolutely kill for it, and then there are those that just literally could care less. Objectively though, we're speaking objectively, you're gonna be able to get shots on the A1II that you wouldn't be able to get on the A1 because of pre-capture. And depending on who you are specifically, this feature alone can justify the purchase of this camera. Yes, that it can mean that much to someone. Now for those moments of uncertainty, right? It takes so much of the anxiety and guesswork away. And for birding specifically, right? It's straight up cheating how easy it is to nail that shot. Now shooting alongside Jared and Vanessa shooting Canon R1s and Canon R5 Mark IIs, a huge advantage of the A1 that I didn't realize before was that with the A1II, I am able to map it to a custom button, okay? So I mapped it to this button here on the lens, and now I can quickly toggle it off and on when I felt like I needed it. When I didn't need it, I didn't have to dig into the menu or press multiple buttons to turn off pre-capture. That can lead to either missing shots or taking too many damn shots because you forgot to turn it off. But I'm not gonna lie, I did forget to turn it off sometimes. The adrenaline's pumping when you're shooting these animals, these wild animals right next to your car. And it led me to like fill up my cards really fast. I came home with thousands of photos of just very, you know, it wasn't a good deal, but being able to map it is a powerful feature. And pre-capture alone, this is a powerful feature. When you think about Nikon, it only shoots JPEG in with pre-capture, and Canon does it as well. But again, not at 50 megapixels. The R5 II can do it, but the amount of shots that you can get in a burst are less, and you can't instantly map it to a button where you can turn it on and off. So there's a huge advantage here when comparing to the competition for pre-capture. Now for this rare leopard sighting that we had, I definitely was shooting at 30 frames per second, and I don't regret it at all. Now for this edit, I'm gonna have a little bit of fun. I chose the warming sun preset. I like the warm tones, and I already can tell that it added some atmosphere in the shadows behind the leopard, and I like it. I went straight to the HSL tab like I normally do, and I adjusted the hues of the greens, this time to make them appear more actual green. I also increased the luminance of the greens a bit. Now, because it looks like the Leopard has a bit of a slit lighting going on the right side of the face, or the right side of the image, I wanted to see if I could add a realistic looking sun ray that doesn't look cheesy. So I created a mask where I wanted the sun ray to be, and after tinkering with the sliders a little bit, damn, this looks insane. Then I used a tool called Mystical, where it gives this image this really glowy, softening look, kind of gives it a dreamy aesthetic. And I finished it off with brightening up the eyes of the Leopard. This is the final photo. Sheesh. Oh my God. Image quality. Okay, there's no surprises here. Nothing has really changed with the image quality, but this is not a bad thing. Looking at this sensor and the readout speed, I never saw any kind of trade-off with the images coming out of it, right? Paired up with the 400mm and even the 300mm. It's hard to describe to you how breathtaking the images are straight out of camera, even at higher ISOs like 32, 4000, 6400. The amount of dynamic range and latitude in the files. I really have nothing negative to say about transferring this sensor over to the A1II. I think that this is one of the best imaging sensors ever created, in my opinion, if not the best. And this is coming from someone that has a lot of experience in the full frame space with these high resolution sensors, and even in the medium format space with the Hasselblad X2D, which still is superior. But what I'm saying, the readout speed, there is very little compromise there. Now let's talk about the speed of the camera. Again, nothing has really changed here, but one thing I do like is how you can, ironically, how you can throttle down the frames per second when it's not needed. Now, I mentioned this before, I really like having this physical dial here on the left side. I like having this physical dial to change my drive mode, but when I'm holding the lens out like this, it's really hard to let go of this and change that drive mode. And that's what I really like, how Sony implemented this boost mode here, this custom button right here next to the grip, where I can quickly switch to 5 or even 10 frames per second if I'm in 30 frames per second, and it is absolutely overkill for what I am shooting. Okay, I'm getting hot. And now to answer the big question. Who should be upgrading to the A1II? Who is this camera for? Who should be buying the A1 instead of the A1II? God, that is such a loaded question. There are so many nuances to this answer. Before I give you the answer or my opinion, again, I want to thank Luminar Neo for sponsoring this trip. I was able to go to Africa, review the A1II, at the same time showcase their software, which has only gotten better over the years. Their raw processing has gotten better. The features have gotten more reliable. I mean, do you see the light control? I'm able to make an image look like it was shot with off-camera flash in less than a minute. The color match, matching the color grade of another photo and being able to fine-tune it with the sliders, being able to create atmosphere in photos without any Photoshop experience. That's the thing with Luminar, is that it truly is a fun place to edit, because you can do things with an image that you can really stylize your photo and not need to watch all these tutorials on YouTube to create a certain look, or looks that you may not have ever thought about. You can do in Luminar. It's a really fun place to edit. And low-key, I think I dropped some pretty good gems in this video on how I approach editing in general. So if you want to check out Luminar for yourself, I'm going to leave a discount code down in the description box. All right, this is 15% off, and it is only for a limited time. So I would check that out as soon as you can. All right, now back to my recommendation. I'd be lying if I said that giving this recommendation, it's really hard to, because this is a really nuanced topic recommendation, because the camera is $6,500. It's not like I'm recommending a $2,000 camera. I need to know the ins and outs of what you do to give you a proper recommendation, but I'm going to do my best here, given that, just trying to take in all the factors. And also the Safari, there's so much content that I had to sift through to make this video, I realized that, okay, maybe I rushed it a little bit. I didn't give all the little nuanced details that I wanted to give. Like watching it over, I didn't talk about like what specific animals it struggled with and in what lighting scenarios it struggled with. Another important one was AF tracking. How does it track animals when they pass by a tree? Does the autofocus focus on the tree and forget about the animal, or does it stick with them? And I'll just give you the answer right now. So we're looking at the footage. The A1II does have a small, I wouldn't say small, I would say a substantial, like it is a substantial improvement over the A1 when tracking animals, let's say when they go behind a tree. The A1II, I think because of the subject detection, it notices the animal far away, unlike this one, and the animal passes by the tree. Most of the time, it does not focus on the bush or the tree. And it's not perfect, but most of the time it doesn't. With the A1, it does a good job still with the autofocus set to locked on, but because this camera doesn't really, it struggles with finding the animals. Most of the time I'm getting just the little boxes over the animal. And when the animal passes by a tree or something, it is more often tripped up and it starts focusing on the bush, and then it'll have to wait till the animal shows up and then have to like jiggle the camera a little bit to try to gain focus back on the animal. So the autofocus tracking is improved substantially, which leads me to, okay, giving my recommendation finally. All right, wildlife photographers, I think that this, depending on if you make, I don't know if you make money or not, I'm gonna just, okay, assume just wildlife photographer. I think this is probably the niche that will benefit most from this camera, simply because the Precapture changes everything when it comes to shooting anything unpredictable. Birds, reptiles, these things are squirmy. You don't know when they're gonna leave. It allows you to nail that shot and not miss the moment if you're ready for it. The autofocus with animals specifically is just amazing, especially compared to the A1. This is like one of the A1's biggest weaknesses is the animal AF. And so on and so forth, all the little things, being able to throttle up and throttle down the frames per second is really nice when you're shooting different kinds of animals. For sports photographers, I shoot MLB baseball when the season, but I haven't had a chance to. I was able to shoot the Jets game. I talked about my experience with the Jets game. For football specifically, there's not really much of a benefit, at least for me. Football, I'm shooting mostly center point because there's too many players. I want the action to stay in the middle here. I don't really need Precapture because the action only lasts a couple seconds anyways, and I'm bursting. You know, I'm not really missing anything. But for baseball, I could see this camera being a big deal. The A1II, because, well, Precapture. When the pitcher's throwing the ball, let's say he throws 10 pitches in a sequence. Photographers are there every time. They're taking the photos just in case he hits the ball. Well, with the A1II, I could just sit there with Precapture on, half press, and not waste all my shots. So when he does hit the ball, when he does swing, I press the shutter. Now I captured everything prior to that. I can see that being really beneficial, along with some of the autofocus improvements. For baseball, I do think that it's worth it. I don't know about the other sports. But in general, for sports, wildlife, yeah, this will be a nice, really nice update. Now for portrait, wedding, event photographers, it's a little different now. As mainly a portrait photographer myself, other than, let's say, if I wanted to improve the ergonomics, which isn't a big deal for me. If it wasn't for me wanting that screen that I can also flip to the side and take some test shots. So low-key, I like taking test shots of myself with the light setup real quick just to see how it looks. I can't do that really with the A1 and be able to see myself. And also for if you do a little bit of video, you want that screen, you want a do-it-all camera, sure. But for portrait, event, I don't think that it's worth it given the huge price of the A1II. And I don't know what these are going to go for on the secondhand market. Again, it's just very nuanced. What do you value in a camera? Do you value ergonomics, right? The better autofocus, all the little things. I would say no for portrait, event, people. Wildlife, sports, yes. I'm very, very hesitant to recommend anything to anybody because I understand that I need to know more about you. Like when someone asks you out of the blue, hey, what camera should I buy? It gives me anxiety to hear that question, because I'm like, okay, I have to give you a questionnaire before I could even get started on giving you a proper recommendation. I'm just one of those people. I'm very like a perfectionist. I have to give you that perfect recommendation. So this is the best I can do with a camera just staring at me. I don't know anything about you. That's the best I can do. I hope that you enjoyed this video. I am not a wildlife photographer. It's the first time I ever did anything like this. Constantly just been pushing myself this year, which I'm going to make a video about before that year ends, is how I've grown as a photographer. I mean, I wasn't a sports photographer. I wasn't wildlife. I didn't do any of this stuff. And now I'm diving in, learning a lot about, and have gained a new respect for wildlife photographers, sports photographers as well. All right, that is all. Talk to you later.